We're going back to craftsmanship.
Yeah.
The time after time after time, what Daniel and I see in the world of whiskey isn't people looking to get rich because whiskey's popular. These are artists. What's like the depths that age and that ancient family pedigree can give us.
So there's a whole movement inside the whiskey community of people who are like, well, unless you meet these 4 requirements that I think are quality, then you are bullshit.
Our goal is to figure out what is whiskey capable of.
It's this right here.
Cheers. That is good. Wow.
Right?
I'm Kirby Allison, and I love helping the well-dressed acquire and care for their wardrobes. Join me as we explore the world of quality, craftsmanship, and tradition. Hi, I'm Kirby Allison, and in today's video, I have the distinct pleasure of traveling down to Austin, Texas to visit one of the meccas of whiskey, none other than the Whiskey Vault. Here we're going to step into the vault and actually see one of the largest whiskey collections in America, if not the world, over 3,000 bottles, and visit with Daniel, who is a level 3 sommelier, and of course those that watch the Whiskey Vault, Rex, who is a Mooch. This is a channel that I've been following for a long time. Daniel and Rex, I'm huge fans of them, and it's so exciting to be able to walk into the Whiskey Vault and talk about a shared passion with them, which is quality, craftsmanship, and tradition. So join me as we walk inside for this whiskey adventure. So here we are in the Whiskey Vault. Of course, we've got Daniel. Hey, thank you. Level 3 whiskey sommelier.
That's true.
And we've got Rex, of course, the resident Mooch.
Grandmaster.
Grandmaster Mooch.
Yeah.
And we are in what is one of the most incredible whiskey meccas I've ever been in my life. I feel oddly at home here, I suppose.
We have some bottles.
Just tuck right in.
A few bottles
Make
in.
yourself at home. Yeah.
You know, we enjoyed a nice cigar outside, you know, for a video that we're going to publish on your channel.
Yes.
And now it's our turn to have some fun. And one of the most amazing rooms I've ever seen. This is incredible. So, I mean, how long have you guys been doing this? How long has your alcoholism really been a problem?
That's really 2 different questions there, yeah.
Well, first, I mean, we have to thank the Whiskey Tribe,
Yes.
the Magnificent Bastards, the viewers. Their generosity
Okay.
is one of the biggest reasons why these bottles are in the room.
All right.
People are sending in the bottles that they want to see a review on, and eventually we can get to it, and we do our darndest to give fair analysis of that whiskey.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been doing this for 2-3 years now.
It's going on to 4 years now that when we first started things with the Vault.
Yeah.
And it just started as a review resource channel for the Somms in the school. And then the community got involved and took it to this.
Next level.
Yeah.
This is next level. I mean, I've been, of course, a big fan of the channel for a long time. And you guys have taught me so much of what I know about whiskey.
Uh-oh.
And one of the things, Jameson.
So you like Kesslers?
Kesslers. But one of the things that I love about whiskey, of course, is that it's so much a part of kind of the lifestyle of the gentleman. You know, sitting back, enjoying a cigar, drinking a nice Scotch whiskey or bourbon. And, you know, so much of what we love at this channel, quality, craftsmanship, and tradition, is manifested through this in the same way that it's really manifested through a bespoke jacket or a bespoke pair of shoes.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you guys are the experts, or should I say,
Allegedly.
over here, allegedly. Yeah. And, you know, I would just love to hear you guys talk about and kind of take us on the journey of quality, craftsmanship, and tradition.
Sure.
As you guys have experienced it kind of through your journeys through the whiskey world.
Sure. So if we're starting with quality, one of the things that people learn very early on if they're watching our content is whiskey is very, very subjective. And I think in a lot of ways quality is too. Quality, if you're just trying to figure out your own priorities and preferences, that can be anything from you love a whiskey that has a really amazing pedigree, a deep history, a story that just makes that experience of the whiskey that much more interesting. Other people, they want a really specific type of grain that's used. You know, maybe single malts, that's your jam. Others, it's you want something that's you know, innovative and fun and exciting. So the quality, the common thread that I think is, it goes directly to effort. The distilleries that are really, that you can taste like the blood, sweat, and tears, they're really putting into the whiskey, and it doesn't happen immediately, it's not quickly, but eventually, even the small craft distilleries, even though they don't have a head start generations old, they can find their footing and really start dialing in some beautiful, amazing whiskeys that you're not going to be able to find on most shelves. So I think the quality, yes, it is subjective, but in a lot of ways, I think there is some common ground where most whiskey drinkers can decide, yeah, that's really, they're doing some interesting stuff there. There's some well-executed processes to end up in that bottle, and it just turns into a beautiful whiskey.
Yeah, and I think it's similar in some ways to kind of the bespoke world where, you know, one of the things that's interesting that's been happening in the whiskey world right now is all these independent distilleries that have popped up all over the place.
Yeah.
In the same way that now you have independent shoemakers, independent, you know, tailors. And so it's really allowed, you know, that quality to go from kind of being narrowly defined to something that, you know, the proof is in this room with over 2,000 bottles is quite broad now.
I think what Rex is saying too is, you know, that quality closely aligns with preference, and that's why it's so subjective.
Right.
So my preferences equal my version of quality, and for a lot of time, what people got to try was ushered through a whole bunch of gatekeepers. And so their definition of what was out there and what they could define as quality was sort of guided by what they were allowed to try. And I think the advent of craft in whiskey and the advent of the internet and the ability for producers to get straight to a consumer has just broken wide the doors of what's possible, and thus the definition of quality.
So I'm going to go ahead and get very specific with an example.
Okay.
In whiskey, there's this idea that older is better, and the more ancient that whiskey becomes, it's just becoming, it's more valuable, more interesting, more rare. And after going through about a couple thousand whiskeys, not necessarily the case. A lot can come from an age statement. Something really old has had time to mature.
So you're talking about like the age of the whiskey and how long it's been in the barrel.
Yes, in the barrel. And just a quick side note: as soon as it's out of the barrel and into the bottle, stops aging.
Stops aging.
Yeah, it's not
like
wine.
It's not like wine. So you know, old whiskeys, yes, that can often deliver an amazing result. But there's also whiskeys that are like a fraction of the age that are now award-winning, like giant major awards.
And a fraction of the price.
Yes. One of our good friends at Balcones, they won best single malt in the world.
Yeah, it's best in the world. It sort of put everybody on notice. Like, remember the Judgment of Paris?
Yes.
That taught
With
the
the
world
wine.
that all good wine wasn't Parisian wine, even though it was an event hosted by people who was in
French
their
chef.
best interest. This was like that.
Okay.
It put the world on notice that single malt didn't have to be Scotch. Best whiskey didn't have to be from Kentucky or from Scotland, but that as a Texan using small barrels and 18-month-old whiskey could create this right here. This is Balcones single malt.
Okay. And
This
what
is not
year
the
was
one
this?
that won.
Okay.
This one's probably closing in on 2 years if it's the bottle that I picked correctly. And but look at that,
Yep, great color.
right? Now
We're doing small pours because we got some
We're gonna
work.
try
Yes.
some
We got work
Yes,
to do,
I like it,
Kirby.
yes.
Yeah.
We didn't come all the way down here to not work through a significant portion of this.
taste that. See, that's beautiful, rich and complex and woody and caramel. You know, all the things that you love in a good whiskey. But
And it happens in the world of
Texas.
whiskey. It's like that. So age statements. Yeah, going back to the point of quality. Yes, an old age can deliver an amazing quality, but also there is eventually a tipping point in whiskeys. We've had a few that are incredibly old, like decades and decades old, and it's heartbreaking because it was too much.
Yeah, I had a bourbon in there from the Orphan Barrel releases. That was like a 20-something-year-old bourbon, and it's undrinkable for me.
Yeah.
It's like licking a tar pole wood chunk,
Yeah.
right? It's just too
had too
long
much
in the
time to
barrel.
happen.
Yeah.
To your point earlier about quality being subjective, taste being subjective, in our community, the best whiskey is the whiskey you like to drink the way you like to drink it. And I think the good news is, whatever your preference happens to be, it's no longer a select few number of gatekeepers telling you what's good and what's bad. You can find a group a cabal of people who have those same preferences, and you can go exploring, and there's so many things to dig into when it comes to whiskey. So I think it's never been a better time to be a whiskey enthusiast.
Yeah, there's no bubble. Don't let anyone convince you there's a whiskey bubble. There's good and bad businesses with good and bad business practices, but this is like music, right? When the internet took over music sales and things like that, there was a whole contingent of people going, music's dead, or it's over. But that's not true. Music is... People aren't going to stop creating music. People aren't going to stop creating whiskey. What happened was, if you want to be famous as a rock star, it's probably too late now, right? It's too diversified. Right. But if you want to make a reasonable teacher salary playing music for a living, you've never lived in a better time than now. I would say for craft distilling, it's the same thing. If you want to be the next Jameson, it's not likely.
Right.
But if you want to make a real living as a small business owner and make whiskey that your community and then the world at large might get a chance to enjoy, never lived in a better time than right now.
It's amazing what the internet's done and what YouTube has done in terms of really kind of democratizing this and giving a platform to the people that otherwise didn't have the advertising budgets or the travel budgets to reach the world.
Right. Now let's talk about old school, right? So like the earliest licensed distillery in Scotland, right?
Now, to that point, like there's this idea, same way the age statements must be better. There's this idea of like, well, if a distillery has been doing it for generations, surely that has to be a better whiskey. And I will say that some of my favorite whiskeys come from those ancient distilleries, from the families that have been generation after generation having small teams, really honing their craft. But at the same time, there's also a tremendous number of young upstarts, and they can go toe-to-toe with these whiskeys that have had time to perfect their craft, to really dial in an exquisite bottling. But it's just, I think it's very exciting to see that even something like whiskey that you assume needs to be really old and traditional to be amazing, yes, that does often bring amazing things, but you can there's still room to flex and tease out the edges of what's possible in whiskey.
But isn't that part of the nostalgia of whiskey is the fact that it is
absolutely.
an ancient tradition?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, just like in shoemaking, I mean, some of the best shoemakers today are independents, that are young.
But it's not like they invented shoes.
But they didn't invent shoes, and they're being informed and inspired by these standard bearers. Like John Law, in London on St. James's Street has been around, for almost 200 years, and they are the standard bearer that have taught all these young people who are really kind of rising up right now how to do their craft. And they've all innovated, and they kind of do it their own way, and they make it interesting.
We'll have a comparison on that.
Yeah.
Because there's a thought that Jared and I were talking about at Balcones that I think is perfect for this. This is Glenlivet, just the classic 12. 1824, the first legally licensed Highland distillery in Scotland, right? You can't get any more traditional than that, right?
Yeah.
Still, just a damn good whiskey. Right? It's not old and not keeping up with the times. It's also not avoiding innovation. They're doing some barrel finishing and things like that. But they are sort of, tradition can inform. But it can also handcuff, right? And so one of the conversations that keeps happening in a lot of the craft versions, so I've had friends at distillers, and craft distillers, award-winning ones, who've been able to sit down at the table with like whiskey makers in Scotland who are knighted.
Okay.
And they're like, oh, this is the time I finally get to learn and hear how it all, and I sit down and they won't talk. They keep asking me questions. And they look at me as like, you're living the dream. Like, you don't have any handcuffs, you can do whatever you want. I've got to keep making, for example, Glenlivet 12 day after day after day. I don't have any room for variation. So I've got a lot of tradition on my side, but I'm handcuffed to that tradition. Whereas you get to do, tell me what you're doing. Tell me what interesting things you get to try to do.
That reminds me of our time in Ireland. We were at Middleton. We're visiting Jameson, the home of Redbreast, Green Spot, all these amazing whiskeys. And we did an episode with Jer Buckley, and he's the 5th generation Cooper at Jameson.
Which is really sloppy because we requested a 6th generation Cooper.
No,
You wouldn't know enough yet.
We weren't important enough. And we were teasing Jer. I was like, man, you looked amazing for being hundreds of years old. But no, the ability, the mastery that he has of this craft. He's working these barrels, working this wood, and it's like he's not even thinking about it. It's just instinct, fluid motions. He's carving out of this oak this amazing barrel.
And he's using tools his great-grandfather made.
Yeah, and what was most exciting about Jared, because Jameson, they have some reputation to live up to. They have some expectations. You can't wildly change, what's in a bottle of Redbreast, of Green Spot, of anything, and not piss off a lot of people.
Yeah.
So they need to hit that mark every single time. But what he's doing is he is recognizing and acknowledging and honoring that tradition of those that came before him. But also, he is playing in this world of innovation, even with the barrels. Ireland has this very unique rule that it doesn't have to be an oak barrel. It just says wood.
Just barrel, yeah.
Just a barrel. So they're coloring outside the lines of all of these different types of woods, and some of them will never be usable for a barrel. It leaks, it's not really something that you can craft into an effective barrel. But even a distillery as large and as historied as Jameson, they started up an entire new distillery inside of their main distillery. Daniel, what was that?
That's Method and Madness. And it's essentially a craft distillery, even though it's a couple thousand liter still.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, which is 100 times the size of ours. But according to them, that's craft still, and it reasonably is. I mean, it's the size of Balcones, and so. But what they're doing, they're not even allowed to talk about really. But what they're doing is trying new mash bills and new yeasts and new cuts, and then putting them into new and weird barrels. Like for example, bourbon and sherry, then finished in wild cherry wood.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Right.
So
this is an Irish whiskey like no Irish whiskey you've gotten to try.
So fun and exciting to see even one of the biggest players in all of whiskey recognizing that, let's honor those that came before us. Let's keep doing what's doing. And there's some beautiful things that have come from tradition. But let's take that knowledge and see if we can build on it. Because today's innovation is tomorrow's tradition.
Yeah.
So I so respect the fact that they haven't, fumbled the passing of that baton. They're aggressively carrying that forward.
I'd forgotten what this tastes like coming after all the other things. Isn't that
It's got
unique?
an amazing finish.
Right? And if someone said, "Oh, here's an Irish whiskey," it's like this does not meet the rules of any expectation of Irish whiskey, but it's really beautiful, right? And that's the thing is, a lot of these guys are like when Jer and the guys doing the Method of Madness stuff are innovating. They're actually going back and reading things that were written 150 years ago in these logs and going, "What if we did that interesting thing that they used to do, but they don't do anymore?" Because of taxes and laws and all these things. And what people forget is that the traditions that we're currently living in weren't traditions
back then
150 years ago. They were new.
Never knew.
Right?
So what's an example of that? That's an interesting story. I mean, kind of going back into the archives.
Yeah.
And these heritage firms are the ones that have the archives. Right?
Yeah.
And what are they discovering? I mean,
All kinds of crazy
Well,
stuff.
first, there was the punishment book.
They literally had a book that was like, here's how these employees screwed up, and here was their punishment.
Yes. They'd be experimenting with like different strains of barley and different parts of the process of different techniques to
Different
do.
yeasts.
And something that we're doing way back in the day with older equipment that now may be considered obsolete. How would that fare if we bring it into some modern day equipment? So
Keep in mind, there's only a few steps to whiskey, right? But that doesn't limit it. That actually makes each step more important. Right? Like if you have 40 ingredients to something, that's called casserole. Right? You could mix, instead of normal green beans, canned green beans, no one's going to know in a casserole because they all just get thrown together. You have 4 ingredients, or 2, like they better be good, and how you treat each one of those matters.
Everything matters.
Yeah, if you just get a steak with pepper and salt, the pepper matters, the salt matters, the cut matters, right? And you can make almost infinite changes with just those 3 ingredients. So
finishing with the peat and
same thing with Scotch or bourbon, or right? You got grain, yeast, water, wood, time.
kind of reminds me of George Cleverly, right? They're famous for their Russian reindeer, that basically was salvaged from a shipwreck that sank in 1786, right? So almost as old as the United States, right? This merchant ship crossing, the channel from Russia to England with a load of Russian reindeer leather that was going to be used for something, sinks, and some divers find it, right? And someone shows it to someone else that shows it to an old shoemaker, and they say, "Oh my goodness, this is the famous Russian reindeer that I haven't seen for." That my father told me about, and now they're making shoes out of that.
Right.
Do you find that in whiskey where, people have been rummaging around in their archives and they kind of rediscover something that they haven't even used in 50 years?
I have a nuanced position on that.
I know where you're going with this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because
but I am going to pour you something that answers that question.
one of the things
If I can find it.
what's most
That's
fun and
excellent.
most exciting is whenever, yes, you have, you know, like these families, these recipes that go back since before Prohibition, and they've been making it forever, and they've been perfecting it forever. What's happening recently is you have more and more distilleries thinking that they need to have some type of clever marketing angle.
No.
And they come up with this quote-unquote ancient family recipe from this old person in their family and an ancestor, and you do even just the smallest bit of digging. And you go, oh wow, you just made that up because you think everybody needs to have an ancient family recipe in order to get excited about a bottle.
Okay.
Now the ones that are able to do that, good on them. But I think that angle is so attractive and it's so used in the world of whiskey that there's a lot of people that it's beyond overplayed. They're faking it.
Yeah.
It's not real.
Made up family history.
Yeah, and transparency. It's one of the biggest things that we're trying to encourage distillers to do.
We made up a family story for our whiskey.
Yeah.
On purpose.
To prove the point.
Literally made up a whole history of family
It's
whiskey.
a short story because
12 chapters.
Right.
Completely fiction.
in one of our bottlings.
Yeah.
Yeah. And whenever that ancient family recipe exists, phenomenal. Whenever distilleries can't think outside of that very myopic way to introduce your whiskey to the public, I think that's a really short-sighted, it's a lost opportunity because what we often find is the story that is real is so much more interesting. We're going back to craftsmanship.
Yeah.
The time after time after time, what Daniel and I see in the world of whiskey isn't people looking to get rich because whiskey's popular. These are artists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are people that if they told their real story,
Would be better.
it would be better because today's innovation is tomorrow's tradition.
There are far faster ways to get rich.
A few years from now, the real story of how they got started and what they were doing and the hours they poured into it and the research that they did and the experimentation that they did, that's so much more compelling. So yeah, I love a good old ancient family recipe, but man, it's been done to death, and it's frustrating when it's not true.
Yeah. So what are some examples of...
Well, so unfortunately, the one I was going to find, I can't find the bottle. But there's a distillery up in Oregon that had as one of the people connected to the distillery. It's a total craft, small, new. He's a researcher. That's his job, and he found a recipe for an Irish whiskey, a malt mash recipe, a grain recipe, and they revived it in Oregon.
Okay.
Right.
All places.
And they made it and then aged it and did all the things that would have made it Irish, except for it's from Oregon. And it's this amazing whiskey called Emerald.
Okay.
Right. And so that's someone who's a new craft innovator going back 200 years to find an interesting recipe. Yeah. But then you've got old guys who've been around for forever, like Ardbeg,
Incredible.
doing interesting new things,
think,
like Grooves.
Of all of the big distilleries, I feel like Ardbeg has done one of the best jobs, really innovating.
Yeah.
Right? With these small batch releases, kind of keeping it interesting.
And ironically, the people who are tied into everything has to be 100 years old or it doesn't count are really frustrated with things like Ardbeg. So there's a whole movement inside the whiskey community of people who are like, well, unless you meet these 4 requirements that I think are quality, then you are bullshit. And they don't have time for no age statement whiskey like this. They don't have time for, if it's chill filtered or if it's not the right proof, or if they added a little caramel coloring, then it's like, oh no, you're dead to me, right? Or if you're a bourbon that's not at least X years old, you're not straight, oh, you're dead to me, you're too young.
See, well, and what Daniel's talking about, I think, is specifically speaking to a very firm angle of approach. I'll put it that way, that some people really demand that their whiskey fall into.
And it's protective in some ways.
It is.
Right.
It is. And our position is that's a beautiful angle. It's an amazing angle. I agree. Things that fall within ancient age statements and no chill filtering and no E150 food coloring and all of this stuff and has this beautiful pedigree. Like, yes, those are phenomenal whiskeys. But our goal is to figure out what is whiskey capable of. What is this this.
What's the cutting edge?
Yes. Well, what's the cutting edge, but also even going back into tradition? Like, what's like the depths that age and that ancient family pedigree can give us? Is it different than what innovation and new approaches can give us? Just all things. If it's in a bottle and it's good and people are being clear about what's in that bottle, we love
They can't be deceptive.
It's an improv model,
Yes.
right? It's yes and.
Yes.
It's just improv.
So
So,
if you
what's
guys-
good, tradition or innovation? Well, yes and.
Yes, and
Yeah.
Have you guys seen, so like in the sartorial world with clothing, I mean, you know, each decade has kind of had its own flavor, and you've seen, you know, cuts and makes, you know, really kind of ebb and flow and evolve. And really innovate over the years, right?
Right.
Still founded on a certain tradition of craftsmanship and quality, but you know, being tailored, if you will, no pun intended, to the times, right?
Yeah.
And now, I mean, we look back and we draw inspiration from the 20s and the 30s and
Yeah.
50s. Do you guys see within whiskey, kind of, you know, from a period perspective, different approaches?
Yeah.
Right. If you look back,
Like right now, I mean, we could go back in time, but right now is the best example of it.
Okay.
Because I think what's happening is that for the longest time, each country made their own whiskey, and that's what they did.
Yeah.
Americans, it was most big brands in Kentucky and bourbon, and and Scotland was all single malt, and Irish had its basically 2 or 3 shops with a couple of outliers,
Right.
and that's what they did. But the advent of craft and the shrinking of the world market has let people draw inspiration from anywhere in the world. And so you'll see things like there's a huge movement in American whiskey for single malt, which has no legal definition in America right now. I mean, malt whiskey has a definition, but it follows the definition of bourbon. It just has to be 51% barley, right? Whereas it doesn't match the definition of single malt in Scotland, which can allow used oak and 100% barley. So there's a whole community fighting for a single malt designation in America, right? They're looking all the way back to Scotland for their influences. There's a generation of craft guys who are chasing down Irish style, right? And then in Scotland and Ireland, there's people making rye whiskey, right? So I think the tradition right now that's developing is the world's borders have shrunk. All options are on the table. And we can be influenced from anywhere.
Well, and you can see that taking hold right now very aggressively in Japanese whiskey. Because just a generation ago, who was a gentleman who basically studied in Scotland.
That was Masataka Takesuru.
And then took that back to, he's my memory. Took that back to Japan, and the Scotch influence in Japanese whiskey can't be denied. Now, Japanese whiskey, it's its own thing, and it's not just a Scotch copycat, but the influence is absolutely there. And it's this blurring of the borders of what whiskey has generally been from country to country, category to category. And in places like Ireland, that the bottom fell out of the market fairly recently. This was like World War I.
Yeah, in the last 100 years.
Yeah, there was an attraction, just a very, very small number of distilleries that were making any Irish whiskey.
And I love, but just for the record, I love that very recently included 100 years. That's
Well,
the kind of history we're talking about.
Yes. But now you see not only all of these Irish distilleries starting to come into their own, but they're also winning awards. Teeling just recently won.
The small producers.
Yes.
Yeah, not your
Best
Middleton.
single malt in the world. Waterford is doing an amazing exploration of terroir in the world of whiskey, tracing the barley all the way from specific fields into that bottle, so you can taste the exact same strain of barley. And what does it taste like from that field compared to that field and that one over there? Yeah, it's a really exciting time too.
It's like what we're seeing in coffee. And that brings to the subject of Japanese, because the Japanese are really incredible in terms of their craftsmanship.
Yeah, turning things into an art form.
And so they've done the same thing with English shoemaking. They've sent Japanese shoemakers to England that have studied under the masters. And then they take those skills and that tradition back to Japan, but they make it their own.
Right.
I mean, Japanese shoemaking is widely considered some of the most precise and really pristine in some ways, because that's in their culture. How have you guys seen the Japanese, kind of...
Man, it's been a conflict.
It's a double-edged sword.
It is a double-edged sword. So there were 2 problems, because, like any stereotype, it's a stereotype. It's not universally true. So it's not like every person from Japan is precise, right? Or cares about art, or right. And so what happened was, what the world got introduced to when it finally started drinking Japanese whiskey, when it was winning awards and getting famous, was that art, right? The Yamazakis and the Nikas and the Miyagikyos and but then they got famous. And then they became prized, and they won awards, and they were highly sought after, and prices were cranking through the roof. And in that wake came all of these Japanese producers who didn't really care about necessarily where it came from. Like, hey, we'll source it from Scotland and Ireland, literally put it in a bottle, and then sell it as Japanese whiskey because the Japanese industry doesn't have a legal definition of Japanese whiskey.
Okay.
So there's no regulation on what you can call Japanese whiskey.
Yeah.
And so it's both. Like what you saw was craft put them on the map and art put them on the map, and then following the wake of that success, it flooded the market with effectively fraudulent whiskey.
So let's wash those from the conversation and not worry about those. And let's focus on kind of, again, the top end of that.
Sure.
Right.
How would you describe the difference in approach, or really not so much the approach?
Right.
How would you describe the difference in product, the end result?
I have one
Between
word.
Japan and Scotland?
I have one word, and for me, the way that I experience it, it's the word delicate.
Okay.
I was going to say nuanced.
Yeah. Japanese whiskey, when it's done well, when it's done right, it does this beautiful representation of a delicate, nuanced, complex, multi-layered whiskey that you don't have to crank the proof through the roof in order to get those flavors to you.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, whenever you're getting deep into whiskey, enthusiasts just want higher and higher proofs, because with that, you get more and more flavor, and you can pick out these different layers and these different notes. But whenever you're able to still get a impressive amount of layering and depth to flavors, but it's not a sky-high proof. So you have this delicate, beautiful whiskey, extremely nuanced. Each the man
I
take
would
a
pour
pour.
you some, but you're going to have to take a good 3 minutes
Done.
while I move a ladder across the room.
It's
that
worth
right?
it. We're gonna get some.
Okay.
We'll send them off.
Because I have a thought too.
Yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things I find about Japanese shoemaking is the precision, the nuance, the delicacy.
Yeah.
Right? And you compare it, though, to the English shoemakers, and if you look at it purely on a technical level, the Japanese is just expertly executed.
Yeah.
Perfect in every single way.
Yeah.
But I find that it lacks a certain humanity to it that the English shoes have.
Yeah.
Now, it's not to say one is better than the other,
Because
right?
human is flawed.
Yeah, because, well, not just that, but I think it's important not to get into a moral conversation of what's best, because at the end of the day, it all comes down to preference and circumstance and what you enjoy. I mean, so someone might like Irish whiskey. It doesn't mean it's better than Scotch whiskey. Or,
Yeah, and if you drink it with ice.
or
and
whatever. I mean, but I think it's interesting, though, to kind of look at the generalities of kind of how it manifests.
Yeah, I mean, in even reaching beyond whiskey, we're talking about like shoes. A lot of the things that the Japanese do, there's a phrase that always comes into my head whenever I watch something. For example, I can't remember the name of the documentary, but there's this guy that spent his life perfecting the art of sushi.
Euro. J-I-R-O.
Dreams of Sushi?
Euro Dreams of Sushi.
Yes.
Yeah,
Amazing.
and
Such a great-
the thing I took
And
away
he's like
from
a
that,
subway station. He's like in a subway.
Five
Yeah.
seats.
Yeah,
five
five
seats.
seats.
Or
and
something
that's his universe, that's his world, but he honed it to such a level that people are just like coming in from all walks of life, all over the world, to experience what he's doing in that subway station. And that pursuit of precision and perfection and making sure that it's amazing every single time, to me, that struck me as agonizingly exquisite. It's like, yes, that's amazing, but my God, man.
It's exhausting.
What you had to put into
Yeah.
that to get to that point.
Yeah, and in the movie, it talks about my son, will be like 20 years before he's able to actually take charge.
Yeah.
Jesus.
He'll be 65 before.
Yeah. So this is Yoichi, which is from the Nika company, right? And this is one of my favorite single malts from the Nika line of things. Miyagikyo and Yoichi, but I really like Yoichi. Look how scotchy it is.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. It unfolds.
45% alcohol.
yeah,
Not mile high.
But you wouldn't. I mean, the complexity and the vibrance of that, right? Now, here's the thing. I think it comes back to the early days. So there was a story in the early days of Japanese whiskey when Masataka Takesuru came over back home. And his first job was with Shinjiro Tori, which is now Suntory and Yamazaki at the time. And they hired Masataka as the master distiller. Hey, create us a whiskey brand, basically. The first thing, and this is just from the stories, I don't know what it tasted like, but the first thing evidently was a really smoky, aggressive whiskey, because Masataka Takesuru trained at Springbank and among other
These are the big,
hefty,
smoky, heavy hitters in Scotland.
right?
Yeah.
Among others, he trained at several, but they followed that with a release of a whiskey that was far more mild and less smoky and far more subtle. And the quote from Shinjiro Tori was, "The Japanese palate is is too nuanced and delicate to have to deal with these blunt instruments of this
The
smoky
Japanese
whiskey,
would say
right?
that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and
It's
so
like a sharp sushi knife.
yeah, right.
Honed over decades.
And I think that really drove a lot of the production of Japanese whiskey, which is we don't need these punch you in the face flavors.
Right.
We need subtlety, nuance, and
which is so very Japanese.
yeah.
Yeah, well, and one of the more fun things that we see whenever people are watching our content, they get into our community, and maybe they're new to whiskey. Maybe they're starting with something that's very common, a low proof, they put it in some cocktails, they get curious, they want to go exploring. And often that's going to be like a Jameson, or a Bullet, or a Jack Daniels, or a Buffalo Trace.
Yeah.
And then you start having conversations with true whiskey nerds, whiskey enthusiasts, people that are deep into the scene, and you get teased into higher and higher proofs, bigger, more pronounced flavors, turning up that volume. And what we very often see is this progression where people are just teasing up that ABV, that alcohol by volume, little by little, until pretty soon they're in cask strength territory, straight out of the barrel.
Which is fire and fury. At that
Well,
point.
but if you acclimate to that level, you're not getting burned, and oh my gosh, it's this cacophony, a waterfall of flavors that's just falling over you. But what's really the most fun for us is whenever we see somebody go up to that level and then go all the way back to those low 80 proof, 90 proof whiskeys, and all of a sudden they're better equipped to start teasing out layers of nuance and complexity and delicate little notes that were never able to be perceived before because they'd gone on that journey.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, I think of just dressing and the journey that most men have sartorially is they follow the rules first.
Don't look at me.
Yes. Yeah. You know, the evolution, the black t-shirt, it's a very...
Wait.
Yeah, look at him.
No,
Look at him.
I landed here, actually.
Kirby, we talked about I wore my best sandals for you.
But, you follow the rules and you start with, following the rules because the rules exist for a reason. Black tie is black tie and it's very rigid for a reason. But at some point you master those rules and then you kind of fall back to what the Italians do, which is sprezza, which is, okay, you know the rules, but you begin playing around, you have fun, and you individualize it.
Just
Yes.
one interesting thing.
Right, one interesting
That's
thing.
my rule.
You're not trying too hard, which, would be ideal. And,
Sometimes I feel like I'm not trying hard enough.
Yeah. Rex hit that one out of the park.
the mooching.
Yes.
That's the best part.
That's the most effort I put into
Yep.
anything.
Yes.
But, at that point, it really becomes your own.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's my kind of, I guess, one of the finishing
Yeah.
questions I'd like to leave you guys with is as you guys have kind of gone full circle and journey through your journey, probably not full circle yet, but where have you landed in terms of like what it is that you personally enjoy and that you kind of say is a manifestation of what you like and your lifestyle and your preferences, and that's kind of your own?
I want to go first.
Well, while you're doing that,
Yeah.
I'm going to go get a secret key.
You do that.
That cameras cannot see, but you guys will be
So
able to see.
there's a vault in the vault apparently.
Yeah.
We can't see where it's hidden.
I'll just,
under the cabinet.
There you go. What's most enjoyable and most
This is really, this is
it
delicate.
is. It is. It's beautiful.
It's a delicate cascade.
We came fresh
of
off the
nuanced
heels,
flavors.
fresh off the heels of that Ardbeg. There's shelters, like there's some smoky elements, a little bit of salt in there, arguably some earthiness, but then you get into like the Japanese iteration, and like yes, those are there, but there's also more light, delicate, teased out layers. Yeah. So what's most fun for me, frankly, after having gone through hundreds, like damn near 2,000 whiskeys, I feel privileged. I'm very thankful to everybody in the whiskey tribe that's put us in this position to be able to experience these whiskeys. But at this point, I feel like I have experienced the breadth and depth of what whiskey is right now. I think it's always growing in interesting directions, and I'm very excited to explore what those are. What's most fun for me is watching people in our community discover these categories, discover these bottlings, and do that in a way that it's okay to have your own unique preferences. Rule number one, the best whiskey is whiskey you like to drink the way you like to drink it.
Yes.
In the whiskey tribe, that doesn't mean, you can't have strong preferences. It doesn't mean you can't hate whiskeys. That just means you can't be an ass to people for their own preferences.
Yeah,
That's it. It's a really easy bar to achieve. And to explore what whiskey is capable of in our distillery that our community has funded. It's the world's first crowdsourced whiskey distillery. And what we make, say, guys, what do you want to make?
Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's do all of the things.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
So you're going to need a new glass.
Yeah. All right. right.
both of you.
Okay.
Finish that.
So here's the thing. I'm still into big, hefty, smoky Lafroigs, Ardbegs.
He's not as advanced as I am, so.
Wait, which camera? What's it? But what I find following Rex's story of big falling back into understanding a nuance in something you previously considered simple was I don't typically prefer Speyside Scotch because it's often unpeated, if not mostly. It's softer. It tends to be a little more floral and these kinds of things, right?
It's very sweet. You're not a sweet guy.
I'm not.
Yeah.
But there's one Scotch that transitioned me from I like Jameson and I like whiskey and I drink it at the bar when I play music to what? Whiskey? Right? And I still come back to this whiskey as one of the most subtle whiskeys I've ever had that is also not boring. It like crawling in on the Japanese influence of it's just this floral and fruity, and then there's this zest of black pepper and citrus, and it softens into honey, and it's just this magical exploration that takes place in a really subtle environment. And my journey has taken me from exploring all these really aggressive, dramatic flavor profiles to continually returning to the simple beauty. And for me, that one is Longmorn 16.
Wow.
Now, this doesn't exist anymore. If you can find a bottle, buy it.
For the camera.
Buy all of them. If you can
And
find
send
it.
him to Daniel.
Because what happened was, and this is just a proof, age doesn't change everything, right? This is the original, or not original, but this is the more recent bottling of Longmorn 16 before they changed. And it was my all-time favorite. It has this just magical flavor journey. Recently, a new guy took over.
Watch you not pour it.
Yeah, it's empty.
I'm going to tell you
And
that.
you just puts the box
Recently, a new guy took over, and the first thing he did was change the recipe and make it more older whiskey. Because remember, 16 just means the youngest barrel 16, right? So he added more old whiskey to the mix,
And changed it.
and it destroyed everything that I loved about it. It's still an amazing whiskey, but it's not this whiskey.
Yeah.
So this is the whiskey that turned me into a whiskey drinker.
And Longmorn has a reputation, correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, but this is known as the distiller's whiskey.
Yeah,
this
is
is
the
kind of like
insider's choice.
You've kind of heard of like a comedian's comedian.
Yeah.
This is a true favorite of a lot of professional whiskey makers, and it's not wildly popular, wildly known. It doesn't have a tremendous amount of volume going out.
It shows up in blends. It's a base for a lot of blends,
That's
but
awesome.
on its own, it's this right here.
Cheers. That is good. Wow.
Right? Soft and floral, little black pepper, malty, not boring,
Yeah.
relatively low proof, 48, so it's not cask strength.
Yeah.
Right?
But something you can drink every day.
Yeah.
Enjoy every time.
Right? If you can find it.
If you can find it. Yes, well. So what about you? You spoke a little bit about it, Rex, but what is...
What do you drink?
You've got this entire bottle, or this entire, whiskey vault.
Right.
What is it, on a Saturday night after a long day, chasing
That's
children.
that's the wrong question.
Chasing children like we all do. Having homeschooled and doing all
Sometimes
the
they're
things.
eating your own.
So I'll answer it this way with a question. How many whiskeys do you think I have in my house?
That sounds like a trick question. So, I would think that you probably just have one or two.
One or two whiskeys, and those are very often different whiskeys, but the whiskeys that keep showing up pretty often, it's going to be either a Redbreast 12
Okay.
or a Lafroig 10. That's going to be the Isla big peaty monster in the Lafroig. I want that smoke show, I want that bacon, I want to be tossed around the room a little bit. And then if I want something just desserty and a big voluptuous buttery shortbread cookie, something that just takes me home, I'm going for the Irish Redbreast 12.
Really?
Yeah.
classic.
Let's get this bottle here. So the Redbreast 12. Mm-hmm. And so what does a bottle like this cost?
Very easy to find.
850. I'm just kidding.
This is very easy to find, and it's usually around like $40.
$40.
Yeah,
It's
40,
very
50.
reasonable.
Yeah,
It can be higher at small stores, but it's totally accessible. Yeah, I'm not drinking it because I'm sticking with the Longmorn 16 that I just poured.
Yeah, you had a little bit of a larger pour than us.
Yeah. Wait, no, totally didn't do that.
But I think this goes back to something we spoke about on your segment, which is this idea of like the top shelf cigar, which is, okay, you have your really special occasion cigars, you have the ones that you kind of keep in the back of your humidor that you're really reticent to pull out because there's only so many left, and after you finish them, they're gone, right? Where's the the bottle?
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, the
It's getting
Longmorn.
so low.
Once you finish it, it's gone forever, and so that's not something you drink every night or most nights at all. And so the idea with the top shelf cigars, you've got friends over, it's a nice night, you're going to share it with people that may not fully appreciate what it is you're drinking.
But it doesn't matter.
But it doesn't matter because you enjoy it, they'll enjoy it, and you're not going to cry about it because you can still go buy another bottle.
Absolutely,
right? So what is that bottle for you two?
Wow, that's a red best.
That's
for
red
him.
best.
Yeah, for me it's Lafroig.
Let me put it this way. I'm a cheap date, Kirby.
Yeah.
Like most mooches.
There you go.
Yes, take me out and I'll eat anything.
Honestly, if I had to pick, it's probably Lagavulin 16. I would also say Lafroig 10 when I go out. That's mostly what I order. But if I just had the bottle that's like, this is special, but I know I can get it, so I'm not worried. It's Lagavulin 16.
Honestly, if I think I suspect I have some bourbon lovers in there, I'm going to pull out like a Buffalo Trace. If somebody is like, they want the flavors cranked up a little bit, wildly popular is the Wild Turkey 101, actually.
Nice,
Yeah,
classic.
you would think Wild Turkey, that's going to be pretty low. No, it's very highly ranked and voted up, not only in our community, but in a lot of communities. It's
any
beautiful
whiskey.
whiskey.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like just a Woodford Reserve.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Or the Balcones, the standard release is great. Like with cigars, just a simple Bolivar or a Davidoff, it's like kind of tried and true.
Yep, you know what
I
you're
know I'm
getting,
going to
you
enjoy
love
it.
it.
It's consistent, I can replenish it, and it's not going to break the bank.
Yeah. Like McDonald's.
Like McDonald's. Like McDonald's breakfast.
We were classy for so long. You ruined it.
Yes.
We were doing good.
Yeah. So I have a friend, a good close mentor of mine, who said, never trust a man that can't admit that he enjoys McDonald's because either he's lying or he's pretentious.
Wait.
No, here's the thing.
Wait, right here.
No,
What do we got?
Here's the thing. I freaking love McDonald's breakfast.
Breakfast, yes.
Breakfast. I cannot.
Bacon,
if
egg,
I'm driving
bacon,
by
egg, and
McDonald's
cheese biscuit.
and it's morning, and I'm like, fuck it. I get the hash browns
Yeah,
that are so
absolutely.
greasy. They leave oil all over everything. And I get just the sausage egg biscuit and hash browns, and then a soda. Because the carbonation, it cuts through all the
why
grease.
not? Why not? Yeah.
So for the Kirby Allison fans, I got to ask, what's your guilty pleasure?
Redneck food.
Redneck food. No. I love McDonald's, but I'll say my guiltiest pleasure is you guys are.
Is it Funyuns?
Nope. Or I think it's guiltiest pleasure or biggest indulgence. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
It's all the same. So
right.
I think one of my guiltiest pleasures, because I feel guilty every single time it happens, is we have Irish linen bed sheets that we send to the dry cleaners to be pressed. And and it's like I was looking I was
so posh. That's your guilty pleasure?
but I was
I'm looking for like Cheetos.
No.
Right.
Or McDonald's
like I gotta
breakfast.
put
Bacon, egg, and cheese biscuits.
My greatest indulgence.
Tabasco Slim Jim.
My greatest indulgence is an 18,000 count linen Irish bed sheet that small children.
So that's probably my guiltiest pleasure, just because it's absurd. But like McDonald's, like a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit.
I think you misunderstood the question.
Okay, sorry. Let's just recut that. No, I think that one of the things that I think is so important in this world is to not get stuck on what is expensive is good, right?
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to fall into that
the
trap.
Irish linen dude.
Yeah. Well, it's a rare exception. It's a guilty pleasure.
It's the guilty pleasure. No, you can't judge the guilty. You can't judge the guilty pleasure.
But I think that, it's like a guy who just enjoys a nice pair of Allen Edmonds and shines them and takes care of them.
Yeah.
They're not the most expensive shoes. They're not even particularly well made, but they're good.
Yeah.
Right?
Wait, hang on.
Have you heard of Allen Edmonds?
I don't think my sandals are Allen Edmonds.
Can you get them at Target?
I don't think you can.
Do you go to Target?
You buy shoes at Target?
Fancy.
Yeah, totally. Anyway, Allen
Allen
Edmonds.
Edmonds,
Oh,
yes.
yeah, totally low brow, but still great.
Still great.
Still
yes.
great.
Still
Can I
great.
get a what?
All right.
Yeah.
So since we're here in the Whiskey Vault,
Yes.
I'm gonna indulge you. So one of the best glasses that I remember is one of these stories.
Let me guess. You look like a...
You're not gonna guess this, but you can try.
Is it bourbon?
No, I enjoy bourbon. Bourbon
Okay.
is like where I am.
You look like a, this is the giveaway right here.
The pocket square.
You look like a Balvenie.
Oh yeah,
Sherry
Caribbean
cask or rum cask?
Caribbean cask.
Caribbean. Oh, was it right?
Yes, that's right. You tip him off?
Wait, no, is that right?
Yes, that is right. Now, this isn't something I've had. The last time I drank it was in New York.
Oh, yeah.
At a whiskey vault, kind of like this.
It's called 14. You'll see 14 on the front.
And,
Yeah, I got it.
It was like 1 million whiskeys, and it was
Oh, yeah.
such an incredible drink. And I can't find it anymore.
No, we have one last pour for him.
Yeah, no kidding.
And then I brought us the peat.
Oh, good.
Oh,
Yeah,
there we
that's
go. And the
fair.
peat is. Hold on, should I wash that first?
I rinsed
And so I think this is a great example. So Balvenie, right?
Yeah.
I'm probably pronouncing that
Slight
correctly.
innovation with the rum
Slight
cask.
innovation, right? But
Thank
they did
you.
an entire series of basically their whiskey, but all finished differently. And I think
Yeah.
it's such a nuanced manifestation of how different it can be with just a small change.
I totally agree.
Yeah,
Totally
finishing
agree.
is fun to explore.
Completely different than their 12 double wood.
Everything you
Just
remember?
It's delicate, sweet, nice finish. It wasn't with the cigar that I was.
I think it's
enjoying
funny that we guessed the Balvenie.
No, I'm
How did you guess Balvenie?
that good.
Yeah.
I'm that good.
Because I guessed the Caribbean cask, but we started with Balvenie, so I was going.
well-
Whatever ever I don't put into my presentation,
Yeah.
I put into being able to guess.
It's all up
That's
here.
right, yeah.
Guess the
Tarot
whiskey.
card reader on the
Best,
side.
best friends already.
We need a best friends montage to edit into this.
You want to wear the top
That is
hat?
good. It's smooth, and it's full of flavor, but it doesn't.
Sorry, we're drinking the Balvenie.
Yeah, this is. They took away the smooth.
Okay,
They
so,
added.
all right, let
They
me.
added
So the
smoked ham.
Too much
The-
peat is
Yeah.
poison.
No, it's good. It's good, but I was not prepared because I forgot how peaty it is. And the thing is that peat week. So, in theory, according
Nothing does hangover like peat.
I know. Right? The story is that once a week they produce peated whiskey and then they lay it away. I have this theory that what actually happened was like, you remember Mitch Hedberg, who was like, tennis balls, or Lay's,
Yeah.
I think really it was a tennis ball company. And one day when the tennis balls were supposed to show up, a bunch of potatoes showed up and they're like, fuck it, let's do it. Right? I feel like what happened was in Balvenie Peat Week was one guy goes to the boss, he's like, hey, so we ordered peat for this week. They shipped us a year's supply of peat. So
Put in
burn it,
all
the
the
boss- burn
peat.
it all
yeah,
in one.
the boss was like, fuck it, use it all. That's what I feel like.
All right, let me try that. We'll finish with this.
Oh,
Can we
Rex,
get a
you had it. Where'd it go?
That's right here. You
Rex,
want to
there's
get
a little bit of this left for you.
Oh, thank you. Is that a clean glass there?
This is
Well,
I
rinse
washed that
glass,
one.
yeah.
Okay.
Peat. Yeah, this is as I get older, I couldn't handle the peat hangover. But boy, does it taste
I think
good.
I think that's a fictional thing.
It's experience.
It's like tequila makes your
Yes.
clothes come off or something.
The one time
That's
recently.
Harry in Las Vegas.
This is the Caribbean cask you said? Which one is
I don't
this?
know if I poured it.
Oh, you didn't.
No, you didn't pour it for you. You're
Okay.
still on the peat
This is-
week.
I mean, the peat week's
Here,
amazing.
hang on. This is, this is getting complex.
Yeah.
Let's start you over.
I promised we'd get some work
Yes,
done.
yes.
We'd do some damage.
There you go.
You managed to have a sliver left.
Yeah, that's for me. Later. After you guys leave.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
This is good.
Right?
This isn't overpeated. What was it? I can't even remember what it was.
Octomore.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
it. It was like super peated, and
No,
I
it's
remember
like
it was
chewing
like
on burnt-in barbecue.
I felt like I'm drinking poison. Like this is poison. They've poisoned me.
So, like in beer, you have hopheads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In whiskey, you can get peat heads,
yeah.
and that is kind of like the pinnacle of peatiness. It's the Octomore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Taken too far.
Oh well, some would argue not far enough, Kirby
I
Allison.
kind of love it. But, yeah.
Well, gentlemen, cheers to you guys.
Cheers,
Cheers to you, sir.
to shepherding us through
wait.
this journey.
You gotta make eye contact.
And
Let's make it weird.
this is amazing. Such a privilege
Well,
to be here.
thank you for coming. Yeah.
Thank you for welcoming us in here and all of the viewers. And,
Of course.
of course, if they want more of your incredible content, they look no further than the Whiskey Vault,
That's true.
right? Yeah, or the Whiskey
For
Tribe.
a whiskey try.
Yep. So you guys have 2 channels, and this room right here is.
You just want to set up a cot
Amazing.
and sleep here, don't
I
you?
do.
I see.
Hey,
it.
I was telling
I
telling
may not
Daniel.
have done that multiple times.
Yeah.
Here's
You
pillow and
find him in
blanket
the morning.
under there.
Where is he? No, really what I want to do is smoke a cigar in here, but apparently that's not allowed.
No, there would be a lot of people coming for blood.
I know a guy. Off camera, I know a guy.
Well, gentlemen, hey, thank you so much. Thank you for kind of helping us, with learning about whiskey and, really taking us through the journey of quality, craftsmanship, and tradition
Yeah.
as it pertains to great whiskey.
Cheers to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.